Hi guys, you join me as I am standing right underneath the dark sky in the 11th of February 2023, and today we are gonna be shooting a deep sky object. Well, frankly, today we are spoiled for choice because the sky is completely clear. The moon is gonna be rising way back there quite a few hours later, so we have quite a while with the dark sky, and right in front of me, you obviously can't see it at the moment, but there is the Orion constellation with the Orion's belt, Orion's Nebula, the horse head, the flame nebula. Just slightly further up that way we have Pleiades star cluster, which is one of my favorites as well. I haven't taken photos of it actually since the last year. I have tried the Orion and the Pleiades. I might just pop those on. So those are some of my very first tries, and those images are taken by using nothing else, just your tripod that you probably already have, your camera that doesn't even need to be that high of end camera, and a very basic lens. In my occasion, well, I am spoiled because I still think that I do own a pretty nice camera, which is the Sony a7R III, which is a couple of generations old-ish if you want to say, but it's still really great camera, full frame, great noise, performance, and so on. However, the lens is an absolute budget option that we have today on. It is Viltrox 1.8 85mm, and we're gonna be taking some deep space photos with an 85mm lens because this is the R series Sony, and it has the large resolution sensor, which is 42 megapixels. So we're going to be shooting the camera in a crop mode, which is going to give us around 136 millimeters, which is actually plenty to shoot Orion. Almost, if you want to have the whole constellation in the shot, it's almost too tight for the Orion, because the technique we're going to be using, we're going to be losing a lot of detail around the edges of the photo, and for the Pleiades star cluster, 136 is fairly decent enough. So I'll be talking you through how this is all gonna happen, how you can do this without using a tracker. So the basic idea is you want to find your object, obviously the deep sky object that you want to shoot. In our case, I still haven't decided this is going to be Orion or the Pleiades star cluster. I might just be a bit greedy and I take a few photos of that and a few photos of the other one, so we can have a couple more files to play around with. Set your camera to intervalometer or have like the remote that you can lock the shutter so it takes continuous photos, and obviously as the world rotates, those objects are going to be moving through this night sky. So what we're going to do, we're going to set up the intervalometer for, I don't know, 50 shots or something. We'll try and center it as good as we can, the subject in the frame, and whenever we've done 50 shots, we're going to stop the intervalometer, we're going to readjust the camera to keep it centered again, and we're going to take, well, the more photos you take, the better. Not in every occasion, but generally, mostly, that's how it works. And then we're going to be using a DeppSkyStacker, a very smart software on computer that will automatically read all the stars and stack them all nicely, and we'll be getting a nice fat TIFF file that we're going to be stretching out in Photoshop, and that's where we're going to reveal all the nebula goodness. In order to get the best result possible, there are a few calibration frames that I'm going to try and explain you. I don't know like the full science behind it, but there are bias frames, there are flat whites, there are dark frames that you need to take. I usually just go and take some dark frames and bias frames, so I'm gonna quickly explain you what are those. So once you finish taking photos of your subject in the sky, you're gonna put on the lens cap on your lens. You're gonna keep the settings and the focus of the lens and all exactly the same, and you want to do it outside while the camera and the lens is in exactly the same temperature. And then you're gonna take, let's say, 50 dark files with your lens cap on. Make sure they're completely black, and those are gonna be your dark frames. And then you're gonna take another 50, well, I would say 50, it really depends, maybe you don't even need that many, bias frames, which you keep all the settings. Those frames actually don't matter where you take them, outside or inside, because I think the temperature is not that relevant, but may as well while you set up Again, your lens cap on, and then you're just gonna go with your shutter speed as fast as you can. Some cameras can do 1/4000. Some cameras can do 1/8000. So basically just scroll it up and take some of the bias frames. And then there are another calibration frames that are called flat whites that I don't usually do, but I probably should. Basically, you can have like some sort of, I don't know, like screen, maybe a tablet, put it on white brightness, set it on top of your lens, make sure the focus and all that is exactly the same as it was for when you were shooting the skies. And you literally want to take your histogram in the camera and make sure that little kind of spike is roughly in the middle of the histogram, and then take a couple of those frames as well. Those are going to register the vignetting of the lens and the sensor, and all of these calibration frames are going to help you to reduce noise and improve quality right when we're going to be in the DeppSkyStacker stacking all the images together. However, as I mentioned, I usually just go with dark frames and bias frames. You might wonder why we need to take many photos of the same thing over and over again. Why can't we just take one photo? Well, in one photo, if you want to actually reveal some details of Nebula, you need to crank up the ISO quite high and the shutter speed and all that. Images become grainy, noisy, and possibly even slightly blurry. As the longer shutter speed, obviously the stars are going to move, the nebulas are going to move, and it's not going to look as nice. So basically all this parade is just to improve the quality and generally reduce the noise. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a bit cold. So I'm gonna set up my camera. Probably we're gonna start with the Orion. I don't know, I'll take maybe 100 to 200 photos of Orion, and then maybe we'll do 100 to 200 with the Pleiades, hopefully if the clouds are not gonna roll in, because it is a bit slightly windy. Then I'll take the calibration frames, which I'll actually use the same frames probably for either of two subjects in the sky. And then we're gonna jump into the DeppSkyStacker and Photoshop, and I'll show you my very limited knowledge on how to bring out those nebulas, so you can literally just do the same, work alongside me, and you'll be astounded by the results. When I tried this first, I was like it seemed so tricky and difficult, and there are a lot of different numbers that you need to follow and formulas and so on. Talking about formulas, there's actually a website that I can't remember right now. You can go on the website, and based on your focal length and I think your aperture and your camera model, you can calculate how long the shutter speed should be of each of the sky objects that you take. I usually completely skip that step. That probably affects the quality of the images as well. And I just take kind of darkish. You can see all the stars, and you can see a bit of the sky, if you will, in the night, and that's where I kind of stick it. Usually I dare the shutter speed to be as long as I can, just before the stars start to trail. So yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna set up the camera, and probably the next thing you'll see is gonna be me in a warm room sitting at computer. And I'll explain you the order and why we have folders that we have. Orion, Pleiades, we took with the same settings. Here is lights for one and the lights for the other one, and you might wonder why neither of those have bias and dark frames, because we did take these two deep sky objects with the same settings, so I only took one set of dark frames and bias frames, which are here. So naturally, if you would take exposure, let's say shutter and ISO different with this and different with that, you would have to shoot your dark frames and bias frames based on those settings. But since we took these two with exactly the same settings, we only shot one set of dark frames and bias frames. And you might see with your eyes this folder here called Mars and Comet. So I actually took a photo of the third object in the dark sky yesterday. The green comet, actually still visible in the sky, was right next to the Mars, and I was surprised how well you were able to see. So you can see I took the lights, darks and biases all nicely in one folder, because I took these light frames with different settings, so I had to take my darks and biases with those settings as well. Just to clarify how I order my files, it might help you as well. Little sneak peek of the comet and Mars. There we go, absolutely stunning planet and the comet. I'll be making a separate video on this, but today we're going to be focusing on the Pleiades star cluster, which this is the finalized file that I got yesterday. And the Orion is here, which I tried to record this video once again, and there's another version of the Orion. I actually think the second one, this is a bit too much on the darks, but I think this one's slightly nicer. I really love the detail and so on. So today we're going to be going through obviously the file sorting, which we just did, the stacking and the stretching in the Photoshop. Then we're going to do Starless version in StarNet++, some Lightroom, some blending modes, and then you're going to end up with the exact same file as I did. So yeah, I'll show you full process with working on the Orion Nebula, and you can, if you took photos of Pleiades or something similar, then literally just follow along with exactly the same steps and everything's gonna work out. So here we are in the DeppSkyStacker, and there are a list of things you can upload here. For registering and stacking, we need to register and stack all photos here, but you can see there is none of these lines says light frames, and to import your light frames you just need to click on open picture files. So we're gonna go to Deep Space folder here, over to Orion, over to lights, and I'm gonna select all of them apart from the autosave that I have already because I've done this a couple of times. So we're gonna hit OK. It's gonna bring in all of your photos down here, and this is where you can click through if you want to go through. You can see they look absolutely like nothing special. You can change the view up here to bring the levels up. Don't worry, you're not editing anything. This is just to view your images slightly better. For some reason I can see this image here with a really bad score. I've taken this with different settings. Yeah, this is one of the, oh sorry, path, not what I wanted to do, one of the test shots. So I'm just gonna click on it and we're gonna hit delete. We don't need that. Okay, so these are our light frames. We're gonna go to the dark files here, back to Deep Space folder, and we're gonna select the darks and select all of the darks. I have a master dark file here because, as I said, I've done this before. You're not gonna have it, so just hit OK. You might be wondering why am I talking so fast, because I just know this video is going to be rather long, but I at the same time want to make sure you can follow along and it's easy to understand. But then again, I don't want this to be over an hour video, which it might still be. Hopefully not, actually. And then we're gonna go down here to bias files, offset bias files, click on that, and we are gonna be importing our files that we have our shutter speed all the way up to the max, 1/8000 of a second. And again, you're not gonna have this file. Click OK. We have all our frames in here. Oh, actually, I'm gonna change this back to path so you can see lights, a bunch of lights, I believe 229 light frames, dark frames, and offset bias frames. And we're gonna go down to the left side and click check all. So we've checked them all. You can see all the quantities as I named. We have 329, 20, and 20, which is all nice and dandy. We want to click now. The next thing is register checked pictures. We've checked all of them. Nice. Register checked pictures. Don't change any of these settings here. Go to the advanced. And you can change the star detection threshold, which I usually keep between 5 to 10%. I'll keep it on 7. You can actually compute the number of stars. It'll take the light frame and just check for the stars and make sure you see some stars. If it says like 20, 10 or less, then something's probably wrong. You've uploaded wrong files or something. But yeah, 402 stars for such a close crop seems legit, and we're just gonna go ahead without changing any settings here. I'm gonna go through. If you want to pause at each and compare if your settings are exactly the same, you can definitely do that for darks, for bias offsets, alignments. And this thing, make sure you keep it on the TIFF, cosmetic, and output. Make sure all of these are exactly the same because I haven't changed any of that. Make sure we click OK. If something is gonna come up here in the red, only if something's wrong, it's gonna come up in the red. The only one down here is no flats because we didn't take any flats, and I usually run fairly smoothly without flats. 329 frames at 2 seconds, ISO 640. It's gonna give us altogether about 11 minutes of exposure time, and you can see nothing's red here. We have our bias frames with the highest possible shutter speed, ISO the same, and then our dark files with ISO the same and the same exposure as the lights. So again, don't even try and change any of the settings. I haven't changed anything. We're just gonna go and hit OK. So the first thing it's gonna do is gonna register the photos, the light frames. It's gonna count up all the stars, and then after it's done, this window is gonna disappear and the new one's gonna come up. You won't even have to click anything. It's just gonna keep on doing steps. And the other one is gonna be the aligning and stacking and finalizing of the image, which is gonna be auto saved in a TIFF file. It's gonna read the stars, make sure they're aligned and stacked in a single file. I don't really usually rely on the auto save, which is gonna be saved in your lights folder. I usually save the picture file myself. I'm gonna actually stop this because I have done this already and I have the stacked file, which I'll show you. But how you would normally, when this eventually finishes, you would go down here to the left side, click save picture file. It's obviously not gonna let me because I didn't finish the stack, but it's just gonna be a regular save as window. Just, I don't know, save it Orion, stacked, TIFF, whatever. Make sure it's in the TIFF. And that's where we kind of leave the DeppSkyStacker and jump to Photoshop. Here is our stacked file, and I know it really doesn't look like much. This is where the Orion's belt, I believe, is the 3 stars. If I do say something wrong, then I'm not professional in this. Literally just self-taught, professional amateur photographer with this. And then the nebula itself is going to be down here, flame, and the horse head is going to be roughly here. So the first things what we want to do, we want to go up here on the layers, and on your keyboard make sure you hit Control J. I believe it's Command J on the Mac to duplicate the layer, because if we mess up something in this one, then we can just return to the original one. We're going to be working with a lot of keyboard shortcuts to save us time. So the first thing we're going to be using levels. So you can go in image adjustments levels, or just hit Control L, and that's going to bring up levels. Before we do work on levels, you want to make sure you have your histogram somewhere opened on this side. If you can't find your histogram, make sure you go to Window and open up the histogram. When you do find your histogram, there is a large chance that it is gonna look like this, and this is no good. We need to see all of the separate channels, so you want to click on the little lines here and select all channels view, so we get a red, green, and blue. You'll figure out why we need this a bit later. So make sure you select your top layer, hit Control L for levels, and bring the midtones up towards the left side. Somewhere in between 2 to 3 will be fine. You'll see this is gonna get a bit cringy here, but as soon as you hit OK, it's gonna get better. So we're gonna do this a couple of times till we make some nebulas actually visible. 1, 2, 3, and we're gonna do the third time over here. And you can see all of the, obviously this little spike here is all the way to the left because the image is rather dark, but our task is gonna try and bring this over slightly here and make sure it's as wide as possible. So we're gonna hit OK once again, and we're gonna do Control L once more. We're gonna bring the midtones again, but this time around we're actually gonna follow along with the dark shadows towards the right side. This is how we're gonna stretch it out. We're gonna hit OK this time around, and before we do anything else, I'll just hide that for the moment. We're gonna do a major crop to get rid of all the aligned and stacked and blurred and blurry and artifactful edges, because this is gonna be rather aggressive crop regardless, without any particular proportion in my mind. This is our file. So I'm gonna open up the histogram once again, and you can see we have slight yellow tint, yellow-greenish tint to the file itself. And if you look at the red, green, blue channels, you can see the blue is lacking behind, or you can say the red and green are slightly forwards. So if you want to hit Control L once again, and you want to go to RGB, and you can literally take any of these channels to fix it, but I'll do blue instead of bringing these two back, I'm just gonna bring the blue forward. So if I take the shadow one, I'll take away the blue even further. So that's not what you want to do. You want to take the mid slider and bringing towards the shadows. You'll see how the blue spike moves up towards the right side here. And we're actually gonna leave it kind of a little bit, maybe. Okay, we can get rid of the red slightly, maybe. Yeah, because it's a bit kind of purplish pink from the shadow side. We're gonna bring away the reds. Oh my god, this is actually looking fairly good for early stretch. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna duplicate the layer by selecting it and hitting on your keyboard Control J once again. So if we mess something up, we can return to this file over and over again. So I'm gonna do a couple of gentle stretches. We're gonna work our midtones quite aggressively and then shadows very gently, because we don't want this to make this completely like pitch black. I'm just hitting Control L, bringing the midtones to the left and the shadows to the right. Every time we do this, we reveal more and more nebula. So you can probably do just slight adjustments like this endlessly, literally, till you've probably reached the potential of the file. So far so good. We got the Orion, the Running Man, the horse head very faintly here, and the Flame Nebula up here. So what we're gonna do now, I'm just gonna make sure I duplicate the layer just in case I mess it up. We're gonna go down here and get the curves layer. Where's the curves? Curves are here, and you can see the spike is up here quite far away from the left hand side. So we're gonna take the shadow slider, the point on the shadows, don't move it up the way. What you want to do, you want to basically reset the black point and move it slightly towards the right side. There we go. We're just going to reset the blacks. You can see this side is darker because we did have a little kind of gradient over the frame, and we're going to be trying to fix that eventually as well. Okay, looking good. So what we're going to do now, we're going to learn an absolutely insane shortcut right now on Photoshop. So I've selected the top layer here, and we're going to be creating a layer from visible. So the shortcut is, listen carefully, Control-Shift-Alt-E. If I need to tell you where you can find that, then I don't actually know where you can find that. Probably under the layer, new layer based slice, layer from visible, layer mask, clipping mask. I don't actually know where you find it. I only know the shortcut. Yeah, I have no idea where you find it. So it is Control-Shift-Alt-E. Have no idea what it is on the Mac. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna do a bit more stretching, bring up the levels, bring up the mids a little bit more, bring down the shadows a bit more, go do it again. You see it's getting purpley again, like this bright area here. We're gonna bring the shadows down a bit more than normal. There we go. And a way to try and fixing the gradient, I don't know, I'm just getting lost with my English right now. We can come down here and select the layer, make sure you click down here on a little layer mask icon, make sure it's filled with white, select the image itself and go again to the levels and make sure we bring the shadows far enough so this side looks nice. Ignore the left side at the moment. We're just gonna bring it up so this side actually looks kind of nice and dark as well. So we're gonna leave it at something like this. Hit OK. Then what you want to do, you want to find a gradient tool. There we go, gradient tool, and make sure you have your gradient set to from black to completely transparent. Select the layer mask, and from the black side we're gonna start from the darker side of the image, so this side is not going to be affected by the recent levels that we just did. So if we do it like this, there we go, the image suddenly looks much more even. And if you want to tweak it, you can just go and hit the brush tool, and you will see based on what color we have selected. For example, I have black now and I'll be painting on the white on the white layer mask. You will be able to see that here. Oops, my opacity is down, and you can see how I make a hole here, and this is back to the original lightness, but that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure we keep this side slightly darker, because that's exactly what we wanted. Let's make the brush much bigger so it's soft and kind of nice. There we go. And I would say this is significantly better. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the crazy shortcut of Control-Shift-Alt-E. Again, layer from visible. And well, this is a point where we can start thinking about saturation, maybe final white balance corrections, but I'm gonna just do maybe 1 or 2 more stretches here. We're gonna bring up the mids and the shadows, and let's do this once more, maybe the mids and the shadows. This is getting wider. As you can see, it wasn't that wide, and this is actually where I kind of like the image at the moment. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna go to filter, and another powerful tool in Photoshop is camera raw filter. So select that. Is basically the plugin in Photoshop that you use when you open raw files. So, and the section detail is what we are interested in, and we're going to use noise reduction and color noise reduction, and at the same time using slightly sharpening. You might not be able to see an instant result, but it will definitely keep our image much more cleaner. So at this stage, we could be working our way to make the nebulous pop slightly more. You can see a little horse head here and the flame nebula and all the goodness. But before we move on, we're actually gonna do slightly more cropping. And you might think this is cropped quite a bit, but it's fine. We're gonna regain some of that resolution very shortly. So this is our crop. You can see this side is still yet again brighter than the other one, so I guess what we could do, we could just chuck on another layer mask. Click the image, select levels, and go with the shadows, and make sure we make the side darker as well. Hit OK, select the layer mask, select the gradient tool, the same one what we had, and make sure we've selected black color as a foreground, and go over this way. There we go. This looks almost even too dark here, so we can take our brush tool at around 40% opacity and just go over the image slightly this way. Yes, this looks really nice. So now I'm gonna make again the weird shortcut. So we have a new layer of Control-Shift-Alt-E. So we have this image right now saved here, and what we are gonna do, we're gonna hit Control U on the keyboard to open hue and saturation, and we're just gonna crank up the saturation quite a bit, looking only at the nebulous itself. So we're gonna crank it up quite a lot. So hit OK, again make a layer mask, and obviously with the black color selected, make sure you using bracket keys you can change the size of your brush, and we're gonna be painting black on a white layer mask. So this takes away all the saturation we just did in the sky, and we're gonna leave it only around the nebulous here. So just be careful here around the nebulous, try not to run into them. And we're just gonna make the brush slightly larger and take down the opacity, because we're gonna be coming quite close to this right here. We're gonna take all this away nicely. And maybe perhaps it looks too aggressive, then we can actually, this layer, we can probably change the opacity. Yeah, we can change the opacity if we think it's too aggressive. I'll keep it around something like 70%, sounds 69% sounds pretty good. And if we check again, it's not much of a difference, but it really does help the image to pop quite a bit. So at this stage, For your first try, I would say you can probably just go ahead and say you're done. What we're gonna do, we're gonna go and make another new layer from this. No, actually, we're not gonna make a new layer. We're just gonna go Control-Shift-S. We're gonna save this on desktop. Where it is, there we go. Actually, I have my previous text, so I'm gonna call this Orion.stars number 2, and we're gonna hit save. So we don't change any settings here. Hit OK. Including layers will increase file size. That's fine by me. Save the file. Now what you want to do, you want to go on Google and look for StarNet++ on Google and make sure you find it, you download it, and this is an extremely powerful tool for astrophotography. I'll show you how to work with it, but it is much more simple on Windows than it is on Mac. Unfortunately, I won't be able to explain how it works on Mac because it is significantly more tricky, but if you want to learn how it works on Mac, there's plenty of tutorials on YouTube, and amazing guy named Nico Carver, he's Nebula Photos channel on YouTube, absolutely amazing stuff. He's gonna teach you literally everything. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna open the StarNet GUI app. We're gonna click run, and this is the Orion.stars2 that we just saved. We're gonna go to the input file, browse, and that is exactly what we're gonna be selecting here. Click open, and then we're gonna output file is gonna be exactly the same, but we're gonna go and change the name of Orion.starless to TIFF file, and we're gonna hit run. So StarNet++ is gonna remove all the stars from your image, and you're gonna be left only with your nebula. And depending on where you feel more confident, Photoshop or Lightroom, I've seen people doing it generally in Photoshop, but I feel more confident in Lightroom. We will take our gassy nebulas and edit them separately from the stars to make them pop more. And then we're gonna bring them back into the Photoshop and layer over the actually underneath the initial stretch. So you can see it's running up the percentage here. It's gonna reach 100 and it's gonna be done. There we go. As soon as it comes up with writing output image and done, you will have your Orion Starless 2 image on your desktop. So we're just gonna go ahead and close this. As I said, I'm much more confident in like slight adjustments working in Lightroom. Again, you can use Photoshop if you feel like it. I know most of people actually use Photoshop for these things, but I stuck with the Lightroom. So this is our Starless file, and this is actually already my edited file. So if I go to develop tab, I'll show you the adjustments I have done. I actually used the brush, which you will be able to see right over here. I painted over only the nebulas, and the settings I did, we brought up some clarity, some texture, some saturation. I brought down the highlights so the core isn't all blown out, but then again we brought out some whites just for a bit more drama and pop. And then to battle some of the noise that we have introduced around these nebulas, we did add a bit of a noise reduction down here at details, and we kept some of the sharpening. So you can see here the before and the after. Again, not major difference, but it's just gonna pop slightly more and it's gonna look much nicer. So now we're gonna save this file again from the Lightroom. Make sure you save it as a TIFF. And we're just gonna bring it back into the Photoshop. Our nebula file sitting nicely here in the Photoshop. Once again, we're gonna go back to our initial stretch. I actually accidentally made this layer already, but I'm gonna show you step by step as I mentioned. What we wanna do, we're gonna use the insanely long command again on the keyboard. Make sure you select the image on the last layer and go Control-Shift-Alt-E. So we created a new layer from visible, and now we're gonna go ahead and select all by hitting Control-A, and then we're gonna copy all by going Control-C. We're gonna go over to our nebula here, and just on this layer here we're gonna paste Control-V. So we've pasted over our stretched file over our Nebula file, but now we can't see the Nebula file, and this is where the blending modes are gonna come in very handy. So the top layer with the stars, we're gonna go and grab, and it's always between the screen and lighten, but because the screen makes it all so bright, I really don't want to deal with actually lighter color. Actually, it looks pretty good as well. Let's see how much we can see through the nebula. Okay, it's not actually that much of a difference. We're just gonna stick with lightened because I don't want to deal with bringing this back darker. So we're gonna go lightened. I'll zoom in here and you can be the judge and you can tell me if there's a major difference. So the layer that we just did in Lightroom, you can see if we turn it on, it just gives a little bit of a contrast and punch in general to the nebulous, and maybe a bit more saturation. If you want to risk it for the biscuit, you can probably do some more adjustments on the layer that is right below. We're actually going to bring in a bit more contrast maybe here. And if we go to maybe levels and just maybe try and bring out... No, we're not going to actually deal with that too much. But this is where I would consider this image done. So lastly, we're going to do a bit more closer crop. 1, 2, 3 stars of the belt. That's what I want to keep. None of this is pretty. Again, you're probably going to crop it to a certain aspect ratio. For me, it's just going to be very random. And to save a little bit of resolution and detail, if you want to print this, for example, you want to go Control-Alt-I, which is the image and image size. And it says 240 pixels per inch because it was exported from Lightroom like that. But I'm just gonna go and change this to 300 and make sure you have resample ticked with preserve detail 2.0. You see the file is gonna be 3000 by 2000, well, almost. Hit OK. It's gonna kind of oversample it slightly larger by still preserving some detail. And if you want to add maybe a bit of extra sharpening, you can just make another layer from visible, which is Control-Shift-Alt-E, and go to filter, sharpen, smart sharpen, and play around with these sliders. Just make sure you don't go over the border and click OK. And this is going to be our final image. We can compare how I did this to the one I actually tested on the yesterday's test stretches. So the original one was this one, where I truly went over the border with the blacks. You can see, I mean, black sky is cool, but this is maybe slightly too dark. If we want to replicate that slightly, we can just add a quick curves level and maybe reset the black level slightly. There we go. Perfect. Now the image is done. And the other two that I did was this one. So the first one, this one, slightly different, softer slightly, but much more purple. And I've got a third version which looks like this. And then obviously compared to the one we just did on the video, these are actually quite similar. This needs some black point resetting, but this looks really, really good. I'm very happy with the image. I hope you are as well. I hope you managed to follow along. We're not gonna go through step by step with Pleiades because we literally did all the steps we did for Orion. If you follow along, if you shot the Pleiades, you can literally follow along these same steps and you will get to this result. You can see, I'll show you the Starless file. It was very not screaming and not punchy. So I took this into the Lightroom and we changed the punch levels and just saturations and some clarity settings. And we changed the blues to more teal because I believe the Pleiades star cluster actually have more teal of a color for the gases and nebula. And yeah, that's where I'm gonna leave you guys. I'm really happy. I've done this in a very amateuristic level with basic tripod, actually rather decent camera, A7R III Sony, but $400 lens, which just shows you how much you can do actually if you have some knowledge in basic deep sky photography. I would like to call myself a professional amateur, which I truly am, nothing more than that. So if I did say something wrong, you can feel free to correct me down in the comments below. Again, Flame Nebula, Horsehead Nebula, just poking out through here, nicely visible. Running Man and the Orion. And yeah, if you want to follow along and see how I did the Comet and Mars video, make sure to subscribe. It's going to be probably one of the upcoming next videos. Me and Maira, we're doing a lot of photography, travel and DIY stuff on this channel, so I would appreciate the sub. And again, hope you have a nice day, hope you'll learn some things, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.